Welcome, everybody. During the school year and in the recruiting process, it is common to speak with more senior attorneys at big law firms at networking events and screener interviews. Hearing from a partner, for example, about their experience or practice area can be very insightful. But the experience of a partner who has been practicing for a decade or more is very different from a junior associate only a year or two after graduating law school. So for law students, understanding what life is like as a junior associate can be more relevant and helpful in thinking about the direction that you'd like to take in joining a firm. For that reason, we are proud to host our live virtual Junior Associate Q&A tonight with junior associates from a few fantastic firms, Wilson Sonsini, Williams and Connolly, Troutman, Pepper, Locke, and Allen Matkins. These firms have different practices and industry specialties, geographic focus, sizes, and other aspects, so you'll get a nice wide perspective from this panel. My name is Albert from Summer Associate Hub. I'm happy to have all of you here. Before we jump in, what is Summer Associate Hub? Summer Associate Hub is a free content resource hub for law students embarking on the 1L and 2L recruiting process. I'm a former law student and big law associate. We know from our own experience how hard it is as a 1L to understand what it's really like to work as a lawyer and engage with firms. Our platform, summerassociatehub.com, has blog posts, podcast episodes, short video tutorials and exercises, interviews with attorneys, and other content to help you learn about practice areas and prepare for the recruiting process. We also host live virtual programs. You know about that because you're watching one right now, where students can easily learn directly from and network with law firm attorneys and recruiting team members. This is the last virtual program in our 2025 virtual series. I guess staying on theme for TV. This is our season finale, if you will. If you missed our prior programs, don't worry. They are all recorded and published in our video library and included in our newsletter, so look out for that. We are also hosting our in-person 2L job fair happening this May. So pre-registration is open. I'll send the pre-registration link in the chat to join our initial waitlist. The best way to stay updated is to sign up for our newsletter. If you have RSVP'd for this program, you're already added to our newsletter, so you're good there. So let's jump into our event. We'll have our panel discussion for about 40 minutes. At the end of the panel discussion, the firms have also graciously offered to raffle off some pretty awesome swag, so make sure you stick around. We'll post the link in the chat to join the raffle, and you have to be present at the end of the panel to win. So we'll be calling your name live on the air if you do win, so be warned. At the end of the panel, at about 8:10 or 8:15 Eastern, 5:10, 5:15 Pacific, each firm will host a separate breakout room where you can pop in, ask questions, introduce yourself, meet some of the firm's team members. The breakout rooms will be available through this Zoom event, so stay tuned for easy instructions on that. Those breakout rooms are wonderful and a really good way to learn more about the firm and to meet the representatives, so make sure you take advantage of that. Please note that the Zoom breakout rooms only work if you're using the regular Zoom app on a computer. So if you're on the iPhone app, iPad app, or if you're on the browser version in the web, the breakout rooms probably won't work. So make sure you're using the regular Zoom Zoom computer app. We also have a Q&A. We would love to ask some questions if we have time at the end. So if you have any questions as the panel goes on, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that throughout the panel. And our chat, we're going to be posting the different links where you could sign up with the firms, learn more, and all that other information. So make sure you keep an eye on the chat as we go through the panel. All right, so enough from me. Let's jump into some introductions. I'm just going to go in order of my Zoom screen. So Sean, I'm going to start with you. Introduce yourself and your practice, and briefly why you chose to work in your practice area.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Sean Bloks. I'm a third-year general litigator at Allen Matkins. I do general business litigation, anything from landlord-tenant lease disputes to probate disputes to large-scale employment matters. I always knew I wanted to be a litigator going into law school. I really don't know what transactional attorneys do. I've been trying to figure it out for 5+ years and haven't been able to do that. But I always played sports growing up. I'm competitive by nature and kind of wanted to continue that into something that I was good at. So that's how I landed in litigation.
Great, thank you so much, Sean. Luckily, you're joining us tonight, so you could hear a little bit about what transactional lawyers do. Emily, you're next. Tell us about yourself and briefly why you chose your practice area.
Sure. So my name's Emily. I'm a first-year associate in the general corporate group at Wilson Sonsini in Palo Alto, California. And I chose corporate work primarily because it's fast-paced. You're working with a bunch of different companies on all sorts of matters, kind of working as an advisor as they navigate certain milestones, whether that's raising money, whether that's hiring new employees, really growing and building their company. So that's a little bit about me, and we can talk more about specifics in just a bit.
Great. All right, Paul, on to you. Introduce yourself and briefly why you chose your practice area.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Riley. I'm a third-year associate at Williams and Connolly. And like the other panelists have said, I really fell into it in law school, really loving mock trial and evidence and sort of trial-based courses. Before law school, I worked at Dropbox on the in-house commercial legal team. And so I got to see some of the corporate work, and I felt that was fun, but I wanted to be with the craziness of the jury trials across the country. And so that's how I sort of broke the tie in favor of litigation.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Paul. And on to you, Hannah. Introduce yourself and briefly why you chose your practice area.
Hi, all. My name is Hannah Baskind. I'm a second-year associate at Troutman Pepper Locke. I am in the Atlanta office. I'm in the business litigation group, but I actually mostly do securities litigation. So that's where stockholders sue corporations for purported misrepresentations and specific public filings. I also really liked litigation because of the motion work, and I particularly liked securities litigation because you're in federal court and we don't really actually get into discovery that much. So less doc review for me, and I've been loving it so far.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Hannah. So let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into what everyone's kind of day-to-day is like as a junior associate in their practice. I think it's going to be really insightful. So, Sean, I'm going to start with you again. What is your day-to-day like as a junior associate in litigation?
Yeah, so I think the fun thing about being a litigator is that you don't really have 2 days that are exactly the same ever. So your day is kind of set on the court schedule, so you sort of know what you're going to be doing in terms of like how to prioritize deadlines from motion practice to, responding to discovery responses, things like that. But I think more often than not, I go into a day thinking I'm going to do one thing and then end up doing something completely different. A lot of the times it's, quick research responses, finding out answers to complex legal issues on the fly is a big thing that junior associates do. Today I was assisting remotely with a UD trial, completely different, something I've never done before. But then you also have, the sort of down days where you're kicking back, reviewing documents, drafting discovery responses, drafting a motion. There's really a broad range of things that you can do on a day-to-day basis. So I like litigation because you get to switch it up.
Yeah, Hannah, back to you. What does your day-to-day look like as a litigation associate at Troutman?
Yeah, I agree with Sean, and I don't want to give you the total lawyer answer which is it depends. I was trying to think of the last few days, and I've been working on drafting the first draft of a response to a motion. I've been pulling documents for deposition prep. I've also been doing research. I totally agree with what Sean said, that your job as a junior associate in litigation is to find the answer to specific research questions. So doing some like one-off research questions as well. So I think overall it's document review, researching, and drafting all kind of combined every day.
Paul, curious to hear your experience as well as an associate in litigation.
Yeah, I would just echo what it's been said. I think it also depends on the procedural posture of your case. So through the litigation life cycle, you could be pre-lawsuit, pre-complaint, strategizing to discovery, where you're answering discovery responses to actually going to trial. And so I have a number of cases now that are at various aspects of the litigation life cycle. And so in a given week, on Monday, I was working on a discovery letter. We're fighting over deficiencies in document production. And so lawyers love to see themselves write and hear themselves talk. And so we're going back and forth arguing over documents. And then the next day I'm preparing a deposition outline as we're going to depositions for one other case. And currently I'm in Georgia. We have a pretrial conference tomorrow where we're going to now argue those motions in limine to sort of set the parameters for trial. So it really depends on the posture of the case, and it really sort of dictates, as the other panelists have said, what your day-to-day is going to look like. And in that week alone, I've been kind of having to maneuver into different mindsets because all of the cases are just at different postures. So that variety is something I enjoy, and it can be sort of a lot at times, but I think you're never bored, and I think that's what sort of drew me to litigation in particular.
No, that's great. Thank you, Paul. Something I've learned moderating these discussions is how much litigation practice is actually preparing for litigation and counseling and preparing for litigation. So I think it's a very interesting insight. Emily, so on to you. What is your day-to-day like as an associate in corporate practice?
Sure. So something that I've learned very early on is that we as corporate attorneys are project managers. We are in between both the business folks, whether that's representing the company or representing the investor. And something that we help out with is once a term sheet is signed and terms are agreed to, that we paper all the documents to make that transaction happen. And a lot of that looks like, for me as a junior, it's taking the first cut at all of these, or the first draft at all of these documents, whether that's the main financing documents or some ancillary documents that are required by the main financing documents. I'm working on M&A right now, so helping with the merger agreement, talking with specialists, ensuring that we're getting the best terms and the best items that the company or the investor cares about. And I guess one other thing to add is there's a lot of client interaction even early on, especially because our clients are so young. They're early companies and they want to involve you as they're making these big decisions. So I'd say that's about it for right now. I'm sure I'll have other thoughts to kind of add a little bit more color, but yeah, that's me.
Great. Thanks, Emily. And Sean, hopefully that was helpful. Get a little insight of what corporate attorneys actually do. All right, so Emily, I'm going to stick with you for another question. So obviously, junior associates, one of the main things that's important is getting new assignments, learning new things, and developing as an attorney early in your career. So what have you done so far as an associate to get new assignments and to continue to learn and develop as an attorney in different parts of the practice?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's something that it's nice to know what is done outside of what your firm kind of says, this is how you get assignments. So one thing that I've been intentional about is getting coffee, getting lunch with folks that I want to meet and that I want to learn more about their practice. So that has been huge, both starting as a summer associate, then moving into the fall. I didn't have to really hit the ground networking in the fall because I had done a lot of chatting and asking follow-up questions and just taking interest in what people do. And that helped really set my reputation early on and kind of set a good impression as you're having these conversations with folks, that they'll keep you in mind when they have assignments come up, because oftentimes work is assigned based on who they last talked to or who first pops into mind. So yeah, networking. I know that's not a fun answer, but it's been true for me.
No, that's great perspective. Sean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, I think kind of echoing that, like networking, getting to know who you're working with, developing like a team mindset between you and senior associates or partners. The litigation big hurdle to start getting a bunch of new assignments early on is getting staffed on cases versus like getting one-off research assignments or writing assignments. So the way that I did that is whenever I submit something, follow up, say whatever else you need, I'm happy to handle it. And also getting as much feedback as possible on your assignments to kind of keep the ball rolling and moving forward from one assignment to another. But once you actually get on cases, then assignments are dictated by the court schedule. And as things start coming in, someone has to be working on those assignments. And typically it's the junior associate who gets put on most of the stuff for the first cuts and first drafts. So once you can kind of get your foot in the door, actually get on a case instead of just getting one-off assignments, then that experience really starts to develop quickly.
No, that's great and great perspectives. Thanks to you both. So Hannah and Paul, I'm going to come to you for this next question. And I think someone had already alluded to it a little bit, the idea of doc review, which is in litigation, doc review gets a lot of attention as something that juniors oftentimes help with. So what, I guess first, if either one of you would like to chime in and explain what doc review is for our audience of 1Ls, and then what value have you been able to get out of working on cases, specifically on doc review, and what opportunities does your firm provide for you to get involved in other areas of a case outside of doc review?
Sure, I can go first. So I guess to go over what doc review is, I feel like it really depends. When I was a law student, I thought doc review was just like one thing, but you actually review documents for a lot of different purposes. You review them to be responsive to discovery requests, or for example, right now I'm reviewing them to use as exhibits and depositions. So it depends what the document review is. I actually also practice in Delaware a good amount. And in Delaware, you can also produce documents to stockholders. So that's something I do as well. Uh, and to the question about value, knowing the facts of the case is a really big deal as a junior associate. And especially in litigation, if you can be the expert on the facts, that helps you a lot. And it also helps you like be brought into the case together. So I'm actually working on a legal malpractice case. And because I knew the facts so well and understood all the privilege concerns, I was able to really be helpful in all the depositions we had. And so stuff like that is the way I think you move on to the next step beyond doc reviews. If you show you can master the documents and you get to do other things based off of those documents too. But a great plug is that Troutman actually has an in-house discovery team. So I do a lot less doc review than I think other junior associates have. And they're able to help me, which has been really great as a junior associate in litigation.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think it's sort of an adage of knowing the facts and being the master of the facts. I think that really does open up doors for you. And I think one of the things you should be thinking about, I think sometimes doc review can be seen as a passive task. And I think it's really helping you to master the facts so that you can then help the team. And so an example of that and how that sort of benefited me, we had a case where I was sort of in the weeds on the documents and understanding the facts. We had a minor motion that we were going to argue, and we were going to have local counsel argue it. And so I like sent over these talking points of all the different facts and exhibits. And local counsel said, "Do you want to just argue it? You know this stuff, not necessarily better than I do, but you have a sense of this." We ultimately got to the hearing, and the other side caved and said, "Let's continue negotiating." So I couldn't actually argue that, but I think that just shows the opportunities that open up when you sort of are the master of the facts and have an understanding of it and recognize the broader purpose. And I think just remembering that and not taking that for granted. Everyone on your team is going to know the facts, but partners and senior associates are so busy that I think you'd be surprised by how much value you can add by saying, "Oh, this document's actually going to be problematic," or "I think we need to be prepared for a response for this. I know they're going to hammer this home in the deposition." And you building credibility when that actually happens in the deposition, and those docs you identified actually do become key. So I think it's really taking the grunt work with the substantive and recognizing that will transform over time if you really take it seriously and give it a good faith effort.
No, those are really, really great insights. I mean, I have so many thoughts. I mean, just starting from the first question. I mean, going back to networking. I mean, I tell students all the time, networking is your first job is your best networking opportunity, and networking doesn't have to be going to a networking event. It's just getting to know your colleagues, and I think that was a good example. And then Hannah and Paul. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, using everything as an opportunity and just mastering the assignment and mastering the facts is such an important thing, and being prepared as a junior associate. So that's really, really great insights. So I'm going to move on to my favorite question, and I would love for everyone to chime in on this one. What is the most interesting or coolest deal or case or assignment that you've worked on? And just a reminder to the audience, please make sure to use the Q&A. If you have any questions, hopefully we'll have time at the end, so pop it in the Q&A and we'll be keeping an eye on it. So Paul, I'm going to stick with you to start on this one. What's the most interesting or coolest thing that you've worked on?
So I think at Williams and Connolly, we have an interesting case where we have a big client, and as part of taking on their national docket, we also have to take on their insured docket, which are these sort of state court litigation, car accident cases. And I think that that's so basic and so simplistic, but I've been on two of those already, one in Dallas and one in Atlanta. And I feel like I've just learned so much by seeing how different states, operate, how different attorneys approach things. And so you can have two accidents, but they're sort of litigated in such drastically different ways. And so I just have learned, I think, so much on the fly by getting in the weeds and going to different jurisdictions and seeing how people operate. And so it may not be the sexiest antitrust case that you've ever heard of or the big merger and acquisition, but it was just the run-of-the-mill case where you actually do develop the core skills that are so transferable. And so I would say those two personal injury cases that we're litigating, we have two interesting opposing counsels, and they keep us on our toes. But I think I just learned so much about how to correspond, how to negotiate, how to build leverage, how to build credibility with the court, and how to not lose yourself in the process of trying to win a case or litigate or sort of represent your client in the best way possible.
That's fantastic. Hannah, curious for your thoughts.
I was thinking about this question, and I also agree that like the first thing that comes to mind isn't like the big case. It's actually like one of a smaller case that I work on. And that I've actually gotten to defend two depositions in the case. And the people that were being deposed were actually lawyers as well. So it was particularly scary because everyone around me were lawyers and probably knew more than I did. But getting the opportunity as a second-year associate to be able to defend depositions was a great experience for me, and it made me honestly love it and want to keep doing all of that. So I think it's the experience that you get is what makes things so cool.
That's awesome. Sean, I'm curious for your experience.
Yeah, so I think the coolest case for me is the probate case that I've been working on. It's kind of a large case for a high net worth family that's pretty well known. So, I mean, you guys were talking about doc review, that there were hundreds of thousands of documents produced in the case. Every single one of them, like the most interesting document you've ever seen in your life, like letters to presidents, emails to celebrities. And it was my job for a long time to go through those documents and, become a master of the facts. And like you guys were saying, developing your understanding of the facts can lead to interesting substantive assignments. I ended up writing the opposition for a motion for summary judgment that was like a really big deal. I was calling it the Catalina wine mixer because it was like the only thing we were talking about for years leading up to this motion, something that I would think like a junior partner would handle. And then here I was as a second year drafting the opposition and kind of taking the lead on that myself. So I think it's been really cool to get that experience, and with the subject matter on top of that, it's definitely been an awesome case.
That's great. And I could safely say that was the first Step Brothers reference we've had in our virtual series this year or last year. Emily, curious for your experience.
Sure. So just a little bit of background. As companies are growing, they obviously need money in order to grow. And so they can usually take on debt from a bank or from any sort of lender, or they can sell equity, so ownership in their company. So when I say financing, or other people say financing, usually it's either a debt financing or an equity financing. And my first equity financing was a Series A for a company that was valued at $1 billion after just 8 months. And they had these massive investors, crazy terms. And what was cool for me is not only was it my first experience, just a couple of weeks later after we had closed, I saw a couple of videos on TikTok of this company that were sent my way. So cool to just be in an ecosystem that's really like pushing the edge and trying to transform our lives. And so I think that's probably my best and most exciting so far.
All right, valued at $1 billion. I guess it must have been Summer Associate Hub. I'm just kidding. All right, well, that's awesome. So Emily, I'm going to stick with you for this one. So you are the only corporate associate on this panel. So I'm curious, what do you think is the main way your experience might differ from? We heard a lot of obviously experiences from junior associates in litigation. So I'm curious, what do you think is the main way that your experience might differ from junior associates in litigation?
Sure. So this may show some of my ignorance when it comes to litigation. So everyone correct me of the other panelists where I'm wrong, but I think the project management piece is a little bit unique, where you are talking with counterparties who are collaborating to come to an agreement that in hopefully is benefiting both sides, and they're excited to be at the table. It's this again, a collaborative experience. And I also think what's kind of nice about transactional law is it's pretty fast paced. It was said today that no day is different. That's certainly true for transactional law as well. And usually instead of a case spanning a number of months or years, a deal can be done in a matter of 4 to 6 weeks. And so if that pace is something that is of interest to you, I think that's something to keep in mind. I knew for my attention span, it would be nice to have kind of the transaction after transaction after transaction. So yeah, I would probably say the collaboration plus project management, and then finally kind of the pacing.
Great. I guess it's only fair, since we have litigators on the call, give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, please.
So I guess whoever wants to chime in, here's your chance to respond.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say, I think that I would agree with Emily. I think project management may be more so on the corporate side, but I do think that it does exist, as Sean was mentioning earlier, with the trial schedule. So you'll get a pre-trial order or a scheduling order that sets the deadlines. And I think the hardest part with litigation is when you're writing a lot, it's oftentimes subjective. And so in a corporate deal, limitation of liability, we want to cap it at this amount. How many more cases do you need to cite to know when you're done on that motion to dismiss? And so I think that that's sort of the gray area that we're sort of playing in. And it's not to say that there's one right or wrong way to do it. It's just, I think that creates another added variable, or you have we haven't talked about yet, partners who have different personalities, who some want to scrape every piece of law in the jurisdiction. Others are like, this sounds good, I can run with it. And so I think it's more just navigating the gray area of the law and how much do you need to actually write outside of the page limits that the court may mandate. And then also just dealing with the personalities of the partners and their appetite for covering their bases or feeling confident in the arguments that sort of dictates how strenuous you have to be on a given assignment.
That's awesome. No, thank you, Paul. Another really good question that I think is going to be very interesting for a lot of the audience members. So you were each law students not that long ago. What is your advice for a 1L thinking about which practice area might be right for them? So whoever wants to chime in on this one, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I can answer this one. My advice would be get as much actual hands-on experience practicing law in law school as possible. And what I mean by that is get involved in pro bono, get involved in clinic, do mock trial, anything that's actually like doing instead of just reading a book and preparing for a test. Once you're actually in those types of environments, you get a sense of like whether or not you actually like something. So as much of that as possible as you can get in law school is super valuable.
No, that's great. Thanks, Sean. One of my regrets in law school is not doing more practical education. So I'm really glad you raised that. Curious if anyone else wants to chime in on this one.
I'd like to double click on that as well. So especially if you are interested in transactional law and even litigation, I think if you can have experiences in law school that help you feel some empathy for your client, that's also helpful. So whether that's working at a venture capital firm, working in-house, something that gives you a sense of the ecosystem that you're excited about, so you can better understand the interests of all parties, whether you are representing that party or a constituent or not. So yeah, I would say here to that, Sean. And then probably the other piece would be just taking as much time, even if it's 20-30 minutes a day, setting a calendar reminder to reach out to someone you're excited to talk to, because you have a unique opportunity as a student to use the student card and say, hey, I'm gathering information. I'm trying to make the best informed decision for my life and for my career. Would love to chat with you for 15 to 20 minutes to hear a little bit more about your story. So use that because it feels less transactional as a student. As once you enter the workforce and they just think they're trying to sell you something. So
that's great. That's a good, this wasn't a setup. That's a good opportunity for me to plug the breakout rooms. So if anybody, definitely stick around for the breakout rooms. This is why we've created these programs. It's a good natural opportunity to do exactly what Emily just described. So by joining this program, you're already on your way. Hannah, Paul, I'm curious, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say I think Sean alluded to this a bit, but I would say even, as 1Ls, think back on, if you have a 1L writing course in law school, I think that was it's not definitive, but I think that was a big divide for people. Some people hated looking up the cases and trying to analogize and distinguish and do the issue, rule, application, conclusion, while others loved the assignments where we were writing a memo or an email to the client in that same course. And so I would just say harken back to those experiences and what sort of resonated with you. And of course, you still have time. Nothing is determinative, but I feel like for a lot of my friends, myself included, that sort of was where we started to see a bit of the dividing line of, I want to play in Westlaw and LexisNexis, or I never want to see that, and I never want to log in ever again after this legal writing course. And so wherever you fall on that, give weight to that, because that can help to inform at least the initial steps of where you might be leaning.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. Also, I think a big part of working at a law firm is not only the substantive work, but the people you work with. I tease that like the securities litigation team, I would be a corporate associate if they were corporate associates, and I would be happy to like move around with them as well. And so I think trying to figure out as a 1L is great. Like I really knew I wanted to do litigation, but I do think like trying to figure out what people you like working with is also a big deal as well, because the substantive work I feel like is similar, but the people will really, I think, make your career better.
That's such a great point, and Hannah, it's actually been fascinating in moderating these programs with partners over the last few months. When you ask folks why they chose the practice area, so often it comes down to, oh, I just really liked the people in the group when I was a summer associate, and that kind of ended up dictating their entire career, which is very interesting, but it's really enlightening. So it's a really good point. So I love that. All right, so we have a couple minutes for some questions from the audience before we move on to our last question. So a couple of really good ones I would love to raise here. One is one audience member is curious to hear from the panel. What reflections or experiences have you had thus far in your first couple years as a junior associate that you'll kind of carry with you the rest of your career? So kind of a big question, but if anyone has anything to chime in there off the top of their head, would love to hear that.
So I actually think the mistakes are what you carry with you the most, which is hard. Because you come from being a law student. I know everyone that goes to law school is like very type A, a perfectionist, and that's kind of how I was too. You come out as a 3L and you know what you're doing. And then you start as a first year associate and you have no idea what you're doing. And so I think all the times that I made a mistake and was told to like change things or do something differently is something that I like carried with me forever. And so I think just remembering that, and then you also get better. So like I'm a second year associate now, and I actually feel like I know what I'm doing. And so you'll just slowly grow from the mistakes that you make and just be able to keep going forward.
I think to piggyback off of that too, you're gonna make mistakes. So a big part of growth early on as a junior associate is getting into the mindset of like, okay, I need to be curious and I need to understand that this career is about getting better as you go forever. You're never going to be perfect at what you do, especially in this type of career. So learning from your mistakes early on, attacking those mistakes with a growth mindset is really important and something that I hope to continue.
That's awesome. Anything to add there, Paul or Emily? No pressure.
Well, I was just going to say to trust who you are and don't feel like you have to shed that to go into these corporate law firms. I think so many people think I have to just be muted and look up the cases and push the email over. I think people value your personality. And I think for me, you know, even I clerked, so my writing was a bit more neutral, but even now on the more adversarial side, finding ways to inject a little bit of the dramatics or a little bit of style into the argumentation that's been sort of rewarded and appreciated in some of the briefs and motions that we've been writing. And so I feel like just dissolving yourself with this notion or disabusing yourself of this notion that you have to sort of shed and be this sort of prim and proper, uptight, no sort of personality. I think that those aspects of you are also important in how you advocate. And you don't have to be the loudest person in the room, but I think you can bring parts of yourself to the practice in a way that I didn't really appreciate until I sort of had more emotions and more years under my belt.
Yeah, I'll kind of highlight a couple things that other folks have. I think you learn pretty quickly what mistakes you need to be worried about and what mistakes you can let roll off your back. And I think that's a great life skill too, to wonder, you know, when do you need to get concerned and when do you need to just move on and let it be okay and kind of take lessons learned. That's a great skill to have. And then I would say, yeah, like learning how to lean into your strengths. And I think identifying folks who do things that you admire and kind of and trying to emulate those things in your own practice, whether that's how they communicate with clients, because ultimately this is a client relationship and business. And showing up as you is oftentimes the best thing you can do to build your personal brand and to build business. So.
No, that's awesome. This is such good advice, and I'm not just saying that. Like this is like really great. So law students, like you're in for a treat because this is really good advice. Coming, you know, like you said, not just for being an attorney, but also in life. So this is really awesome. One more question from the audience before we move on to our last question. So we talked about advice for 1Ls deciding on practice areas. Curious, you went through the process not so long ago. What is your best advice for 1Ls going through the process in terms of choosing a firm and choosing a summer associate position? What were some of the things that you did that you thought were helpful, and what advice do you have?
I think what I would say is I think leveraging Vault and Chambers and now I think that those Vault summaries are like weirdly accurate. And as I've been an associate and rereading them, I'm like, that actually is spot on. But it's not just about reading them. I think that you can actually get a lot about the personality of the firm. So is this a free market where I can go and network and get on any case if I connect with a partner? Or is there a centralized assignment partner or assignment committee that's going to monitor and dole out the work. I think that that already initially tells you a bit of the character of the firm and the personality of the people working there. I think also when you look at now, they have sort of great details on like offices and percentages of people in what practice group, and I think that can be helpful in your interviews. So you're not, I'm in DC. The firms in DC are drastically different from those in New York in terms of practice areas, and so you might get in trouble if you say, I want to be a general commercial lit person at a firm that's really solely focused on antitrust, which you can see through the NALP stuff. So I would just say use those resources to sort of lift up some of the characteristics of the firm so that you can have a compelling story, and so you're not falling into traps of saying, I want to be a corporate attorney at Williams and Connolly that only does litigation or vice versa. And I know Albert's equipped you all with resources that will never happen, but just a cautionary tale of the research you all can do to stay on top of that and give yourself the competitive advantage.
No, that's awesome, and of course, joining programs like this and other resources are great. We're a member of NALP. It's a wonderful organization. We'll be joining 1,000 people at NALP's annual conference next week. So I'm glad that you pointed out NALP as a good resource. And just a reminder to everyone, we do have the link to the job fair in the chat. It's also a great way to meet different people from firms. A couple of the firms joining us tonight are going to be there, in addition to many others. So that's in the chat if you hadn't seen that already. In addition to all the different links that you can sign up and learn more about the firms on our panel tonight. So Sean, Hannah, Emily, anything to add on that point? It's a tough one.
Yeah, I'll go ahead really fast, Sean, and then I'll turn it back to you. I would just say keeping in mind geography. That's kind of a basic one, but just thinking about where you want to be, where you want to set up roots, where you want to take the bar. I'm in California, so I'm stuck here unless I want to take another bar. So just keeping those things in mind, I think, basic but helpful.
Great. Sean, I think you had something to add there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, don't get lost in like the rankings of different firms. And like money. Like you need to figure out where you want to work, what kind of firm you want to work at, and then use the on-campus recruiting process and everything else to figure out which firms those are. Like for me, I wanted to go to a firm where I could be in a team environment for a long period of time and develop those relationships with the same people. I didn't want to just do like one-off doc review assignments and just be a number on a page for my first 5 years of practice. And so I wanted to go to a firm that was a little bit smaller, maybe regionally focused. It's nice because I mostly work in one time zone, so I don't have to answer calls from another country at 2 a.m. But so it's finding like the type of lifestyle you want in a firm and then relentlessly like hunting that down in the recruiting process. And just remembering that it's a two-way process too. Like the firms should be selling themselves to you as much as you are to them.
That's such good advice, and I not relying too much on the rankings is really such good advice because it really depends on what you're looking for. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, Sean. All right, so moving on to our last question. Before we open up the breakout rooms, just another reminder: don't go anywhere. The breakout rooms are going to open soon, so stick around. It's a great way to meet the wonderful panelists, meet some of the recruiting team members and other members from the firm. So stick around. We'll be opening those in just a minute or two. So we're going to go around the horn here. Each panelist is going to tell us in 30 seconds or less why a law student should join their firm. While we do that, we're going to give out the swag prizes for each firm. One rule we have here for those audience members who've been joining our programs, you might be familiar with this already. Our rule at Summer Associate Hub, you're not allowed to say it's the people, because as one else will see, somehow at every firm, it's always the people. So it's not allowed to be the people on our session. All right, so Sean, I'm going to start with you. In 30 seconds or less, why should a law student choose Allen Matkins?
Sure. So the people at Allen Matkins are great, but I think a big reason why I came to this firm is the way it invests in its younger associates. It's really rare and refreshing to see a firm that will give you the type of substantive experience early on that will allow you to develop your career from the roots and grow up to be a partner. Because Allen Matkins really, its plan for summer associates is to bring them in as a summer and then make them the best lawyer that they can be so that they can eventually be self-sustaining partners one day. And then that cycle just repeats. So it's nice to, that carries with it a bunch of retention and peace of mind along with that. So that's the big emphasis for us and why I love Allen Matkins.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Sean. So the winner of the Alan Matkins swag, it's a pretty awesome travel mug, gift card, gym bag, and beach towel from Alan Matkins. Thank you for sponsoring. Isabel Zavala, if you're with us, please let us know in the Q&A, Isabel. All right, moving on to you, Emily. 30 seconds or less. Why should a law student choose Wilson Sonsini?
Sure. So we're based in Silicon Valley. We're an incredible entrepreneurial firm, and what makes the work of being a lawyer fun is watching what your clients are building. And we have an incredible client base, cutting edge technology companies, life science technologies companies that really are trying to make the world a happier, healthier, better place. And you get to see the life cycle of a company, both from really early on all the way through taking the company public and representing them as a public company. So you get the full suite of experiences, both as a corporate associate and also as a litigator as the company navigates their life.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. The Wilson Sonsini sponsored travel charger, Megan Murphy. If you're with us, please let us know in the Q&A, Megan Murphy. All right, Paul, 30 seconds or less. Why should a law student choose Williams and Connolly?
We're based in DC, one office, which means that you'll have access to partners across a broad array of industries who have been practicing for years. As Sean alluded to, at his firm, we have a homegrown model where they're truly hiring summer associates and clerks and early in career professionals who they can see becoming partners. And with our free market open system for litigators, it really is a place where you can chart your own course, develop your own practice, whether that's criminal, IP, arbitrations, commercial lit, anything is possible. And that's sort of what they try to espouse, as you may see in the news, taking on some of the tougher cases when other firms may not, given the pressure. That's just the ethos of the partners and the associates there. And we'd love to have all of you consider joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. So winner Williams and Connolly sponsored Amazon gift card. Kamaya Howard, if you're with us, please let us know in the chat, Kamaya Howard. All right, Hannah, last but not least, 30 seconds or less. Why should a law student choose Troutman?
I think the thing at Troutman is twofold. One, I feel like we're a small law firm that is a big firm. Like, I feel like everything that I do feels like a small law firm. I know pretty much everyone in business litigation here in Atlanta. I pretty much know everyone in Atlanta. And so having those personal connections have been great. And then the second thing is career growth and career planning. Everything that I did since I started here, I feel like has been planned for me. People made sure that I was on big security federal class action cases, that I was on a derivative case, that I was on a case that was going to settle, that I was on smaller cases. And so everything that has happened to me in all the cases that I've been put on has been very intentional. And I've appreciated that. It hasn't just been like one-off assignments or just plugging me in when they need me. It has all been purposeful for my career and to make sure I'm on the right track. And so the fact that Troutman cares so much about their junior associates to make sure of that has been really great. We also have a bunch of lifers, people who started as summer associates and who are now partners. So we also have great retention as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. And Troutman sponsored swag bag filled with various swag items. I guess it's a mystery what those items are, so you're going to have to win to find out. Al Lee, if you're with us, please let us know in the chat. Al Lee. All right. Well, this is a really, really awesome panel. Super advice, really good insights into what the experience is of junior associates. So I just want to thank our wonderful panelists for joining us. And for those who are joining us live, stick around in just a second for more info in the breakout rooms. And thank you for watching this virtual program, and looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.